On the island of Okinawa in 1945, the Maeda Escarpment, a jagged 400-foot cliff face, earned its grim nickname, Hacksaw Ridge. It was a fortress, honeycombed with tunnels and swarming with deeply entrenched Japanese soldiers who had turned it into a kill zone. For the American forces tasked with taking it, the escarpment became a meat grinder. Wave after wave of soldiers were cut down by a relentless storm of mortar, machine gun, and sniper fire. The air was thick with the acrid smell of cordite and blood. The ground churned into a muddy horror. The cost was so catastrophic, the situation so hopeless, that the order was finally given: retreat. Fall back. Live to fight another day. As the shattered remnants of his company scrambled back down the rope nets to relative safety, one man consciously, deliberately, remained in hell. He was not a seasoned, grizzled commando. He was a medic, a non-combatant. And in a place where every man clung to a rifle as his only hope for survival, this one soldier was utterly, completely unarmed. His only defense was his faith, and a single unwavering promise he whispered into the chaos, a prayer that would become a mantra against the darkness. Lord, help me get one more. This is the heart of one of World War II's most incredible and seemingly contradictory stories. Who was this man who defied every instinct of self-preservation? How could a soldier who refused on the deepest moral and religious grounds to even touch a weapon perform one of the most extraordinary single-handed acts of valor in the entire war, an act that would see him save the lives of 75 of his fellow soldiers on the very cliff that was designed to be their tomb? To understand the man on the cliff, one must first journey back to the quiet, rolling hills of Lynchburg, Virginia. Here, in a humble home steeped in the principles of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the bedrock of Desmond Doss's unwavering character was laid. His world was defined by a deep, sincere faith that was as practical as it was spiritual. The Sabbath, observed from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, was a sacred time of rest and worship, a non-negotiable tenet that would later become a point of fierce contention. The Church's teachings emphasized a reverence for life and a strict, literal interpretation of the Bible. This was not an abstract philosophy for the Doss family. It was the very air they breathed. A single, powerful image from his youth became seared into his conscience, a moral compass he would carry onto the battlefield. In his home hung a beautifully illustrated print of the Ten Commandments. As a young boy, he would often sit and study it. His eyes were invariably drawn to one particular panel depicting the story of Cain and Abel, illustrating the sixth commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." He would later recall seeing Cain standing over his slain brother Abel, a look of horror and anguish on his face, with the word murder emblazoned dramatically across the scene. This visual representation of the ultimate sin forged in him an unshakable conviction. Under no circumstances could he ever take a human life. It was a line he simply would not cross, a covenant made with God in the innocence of his childhood that would define his destiny. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Desmond was working at the Newport News shipyard, a role that granted him a deferment from military service. He was, by all accounts, a patriot, and he felt the same surge of righteous anger and duty as every other American young man. But his patriotism was filtered through the absolute lens of his faith. While his friends and brothers enlisted to carry guns and fight, Desmond faced an agonizing conflict. How could he serve his country in its hour of need without violating the core tenet of his belief? The answer he found was both simple and profound. He would not be a conscientious objector who refused all service. He would be a conscientious cooperator. He believed in serving God and country, and he saw a path to do both by saving life rather than destroying it. He would enlist as a combat medic, carrying no weapon, but carrying his fellow soldiers away from harm. It was a nuanced position almost no one in the military understood, setting the stage for a painful and isolating journey. That journey began in brutal fashion at Fort Jackson and later at Fort Bragg. From the moment he arrived, Private Doss was marked as an outsider. When asked to train with a rifle, he politely but firmly refused. To his fellow recruits and drill instructors, this was not an act of deep moral principle. It was cowardice. The label coward, was slapped on him like a brand. He was mocked, shunned, and relentlessly hazed. Men in his unit would throw shoes at him while he prayed, a nightly ritual that became a spectacle. They cursed him, called him a disgrace, and questioned his manhood. The pressure was systemic. His superiors saw him as a problem, a liability who would freeze in combat and get good men killed. They tried to have him discharged on psychological grounds, but he steadfastly refused to yield, enduring the torment with a quiet resilience that only seemed to infuriate his persecutors further. The harassment escalated beyond words. He was given dangerous, filthy details no one else wanted. He was threatened with court-martial for insubordination. Most painfully, one night he returned to his bunk to find his mattress gone. When he found it, the other soldiers laughed, revealing that they had stolen it and vandalized it. They told him that if he was going to insist on praying like a holy man, he could sleep on the springs. Through it all, Doss never retaliated, never expressed hatred, and never wavered. He simply continued his duties, studied his medical manuals, and held fast to his Bible. The very training designed to forge unit cohesion was, for Doss, a solitary trial of fire, a test of his spirit before he ever faced a bullet. He was proving his courage not by learning to kill, but by refusing to break. The stage for Desmond Doss's trial by fire was the island of Okinawa, the final bloody stepping stone in the Allied advance toward the Japanese mainland. The Maeda Escarpment, a sheer, jagged cliff face rising 400 feet, was the key defensive position for the entire region. The Japanese had fortified it with a labyrinth of tunnels, hidden machine gun nests, and sniper positions, transforming it into a fortress designed to inflict maximum carnage. American soldiers, scaling the cliff on rope nets, were met with a hailstorm of grenades, mortar fire, and relentless automatic weapons fire. The ground at the top was a chaotic, open killing field, littered with the fallen and churned into a foul mud by explosions and blood. The strategic value of the escarpment was matched only by the sheer horror of attempting to take it, a place that would soon be christened by the men who fought there with the grimly appropriate name, Hacksaw Ridge. On May 5, 1945, the American assault on the escarpment reached a crescendo of failure. The 1st Battalion of the 77th Infantry Division, Doss's unit, was brutally mauled. After a desperate and futile day of fighting that saw casualties mount at an unsustainable rate, the order was given, retreat. All companies were to pull back down the cliff to regroup, leaving the dead and dying where they lay on the contested plateau. As his comrades began their descent, Doss, from a position of relative safety, watched the retreat and was struck by a profound conflict. He saw the wounded, his men, scattered across the battlefield, unable to move. Then, carried on the wind, he heard a desperate cry that would change everything. "Medic! Help me! Don't leave me behind!" In that moment, his decision was made. While every other soldier was leaving the Hell's Cape, he was going back in. What followed was a 12-hour marathon of superhuman courage and tenacity, a solo performance of mercy in the heart of unimaginable violence. Under the cover of darkness and the continuing enemy patrols, Doss moved methodically across the fire-swept plateau. He was utterly alone, a single unarmed man against a landscape of death. His technique was one of sheer determination and ingenuity. He would crawl from wounded man to wounded man, often under direct rifle and machine gun fire. Upon reaching a soldier, he would administer first aid, morphine, sulfa powder, bandages, to stabilize them. Then began the Herculean task of extraction. He would drag or carry each man, one by one, back across hundreds of yards of treacherous ground to the edge of the escarpment. There, he had fashioned a rope sling with a sturdy double loop not known as a bowline. He would carefully lower the injured soldier, hand over hand, down the 40-foot vertical face of the cliff to waiting hands below. He then turned around and went back for another. The physical toll was immense. He was not a large man, and the strain of dragging fully grown men, laden with gear, across broken terrain drained him to his core. His hands became raw from the rope, his body bruised and battered from crawling through rocks and debris. Yet, with each trip back into the abyss, he was driven forward by a simple repeating prayer that became his mantra and his fuel. Lord, help me get one more. It was not a plea for personal salvation or for the battle to be won. It was a request for the strength to save just one more life. This prayer encapsulated his entire mission, a focus not on the overwhelming scale of the horror, but on the singular redeemable value of each individual soul caught within it. He worked through the entire night, a relentless, shadowy figure moving between the living and the dead, guided by faith and a will that refused to be broken. When the first light of dawn finally broke over the escarpment, Desmond Doss was the last American soldier to come down. He was hollow-eyed, caked in dirt and the blood of other men, his uniform in tatters. He collapsed from sheer exhaustion. The scale of what he had accomplished was beyond his own comprehension. He had no concept of a final number. In his mind, he had perhaps saved 50 men. The true count was later established by his battalion commander, Captain Jack Glover. Needing an accurate report, Glover had timed how long it took for teams to go back up and retrieve the men Doss had lowered. Based on the time and the number of men brought to safety, the captain calculated the number at 75. 75 fathers, sons, and brothers who were given a future because one man, armed with nothing but his courage and his faith, had refused to leave them behind. It was an act of valor that transcended the normal boundaries of warfare, a testament to the power of one individual's conscience in the face of absolute hell. The valor displayed on Hacksaw Ridge did not go unnoticed by a nation hungry for heroes. Yet, for Desmond Doss, the journey was not yet over. In the weeks following his legendary rescue, he remained in the thick of the fighting on Okinawa. His war finally ended when he was severely wounded, first by a grenade that shattered his leg, and later by a sniper's bullet. He was evacuated from the island, carrying with him the physical scars of battle that would last a lifetime, including the eventual loss of a lung to tuberculosis contracted during his recovery. His fighting days were over, but his story was just beginning to spread. On October 12, 1945, on the White House lawn, a humble and still ailing Desmond Doss stood before President Harry S. Truman. As Truman looped the pale blue ribbon of the Medal of Honor around his neck, the president gripped his hand firmly and told him, "I'm proud of you. You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president." It was the nation's highest military decoration, a tribute to unparalleled courage, bestowed upon a man who had never fired a shot. For Desmond Doss, the Medal of Honor was never a testament to his own greatness, but a symbol of God's grace and protection. He returned to a quiet life in Georgia, married the woman he loved, and raised a family. The memories of the war, the horrors he had witnessed, and the constant pain from his injuries were his lifelong companions. Yet, he never succumbed to bitterness or self-aggrandizement. In countless interviews and public appearances, he consistently deflected praise. He did not see himself as the hero of Hacksaw Ridge. He was simply a man who had kept a promise to his God and his country. He often stated that the real heroes were the men who didn't come home, the ones who had died on the battlefield. This profound humility, this steadfast refusal to capitalize on his own fame, became as integral to his character as his courage under fire. He lived his remaining years as a testament to the idea that true heroism is not about glory, but about quiet service and unwavering principle, long after the battlefields have fallen silent. For decades, the story of Desmond Doss remained a powerful but largely contained legend, revered within military and Seventh-day Adventist circles. However, its profound message of faith and courage in the face of impossible odds held a universal appeal that yearned for a wider audience. That audience arrived generations later with the release of Mel Gibson's 2016 film, Hacksaw Ridge. The movie brought the visceral terror of the battle and the quiet strength of Doss's convictions to life for millions around the world. Actor Andrew Garfield's poignant portrayal captured not only the external struggle of the soldier but the profound internal faith of the man. The film's critical and commercial success, including multiple Academy Award nominations, reintroduced Desmond Doss to a new century. It transformed him from a historical figure in a history book into a living, breathing inspiration for a modern age still grappling with questions of conscience, duty, and the meaning of courage. This cinematic immortalization ensured that his legacy would no longer be a footnote, but a lasting and powerful narrative. The story of the soft-spoken medic who saved 75 lives without a weapon endures as a timeless reminder that the strongest convictions can withstand the fires of hell, and that one man's faith can indeed change the course of history.